Runaway brides of Reddit. What's your story? What was the final straw? How last second did you leave? Story 1. Not my story, but my best friend's. I had her permission to tell this story. Back in high school, I had a friend called Cheyenne. We were very close and loved planning our dream weddings. Every month when the new bridal magazine came in, we spent a free period at a bench with a pen circling and gushing over dresses. Flash forward to junior year, and she meets this guy called Nick. Nick was fairly popular at our school, mainly known for his older sisters who were triplets, just known for being the triplets. They started dating after a couple of weeks and it was not good. They were on and off all the time, and it was known that he cheated on her every other weekend when she was away at her mom's house. After they graduated, they broke up for a little bit and got back together after 3 to 4 months. Halfway through sophomore year of college, Cheyenne starts acting very out of character. She started drinking pretty heavily, and due to that, we got into a fight and didn't speak for a year. When we did, it was because she found out she was pregnant with Nick's baby, and they were planning to get married. I was ecstatic, and soon we regained our original closeness. I was going to be her maid of honor. They were going to have a beautiful wedding in the mountains. The day of the wedding, Cheyenne seemed shaky and odd. She insisted she was fine, but I kept an eye on her. 15 minutes before we were scheduled to walk down the aisle, I ran outside real quick to see where Cheyenne was, because she had stepped out and no one knew where she was. I get to the road close by and see a little pair of heels by. I leave the shoes in case she was planning on coming back and go to tell the doc. The ceremony gets put on hold and we're all looking around for Cheyenne. And I see Nick get really angry and hear him mutter, "That damn woman, I get my hands on her." Now I don't know what on earth to do. I'm getting concerned for Cheyenne, worried she fell down the hill or something. So we have people looking all around. I smell something fishy and think that maybe she ran off, considering their past and what I just heard Nick say. I drove into town, which was just a 10-minute drive, more like a 45 to 1 hour long walk, and see Cheyenne in her big white fluffy dress, easy to spot, walking into a bar. I went to talk to her and ask what the hell happened, and she confessed that Nick had been verbally, physically, abusing her since high school. Apparently that morning he threatened her that if she didn't behave, he'd hurt her and her baby. I called the police immediately, notified the Dave coordinator to just cancel it all and that I found her, and drove her to the hospital. Long, messy trial later plus a restraining order. It was behind bars, and she moved to Portland so she'd be close enough to her family but far enough away from him. Now she's getting remarried in September 2020, and her baby is now 4 years old and beautiful. Her name is Harmony. Story 2. Told this story before on a somewhat similar post, but was engaged, so almost a bride, and there were several final straws. A few were before the engagement. He lived in his car. No judgment on that, but this is relevant at the time. So I was not financially stable, and this was just a couple weeks into dating. Another was him wanting me to send selfies of myself, proving where I was at all times and what I was wearing, which was 99.9% my work clothes, black long-sleeve shirts and pants because I'm a server, and at work. So if I wasn't texting back fast enough, apparently I was with another man. About a month into the relationship, he demanded a key to my condo, so he could see me whenever he wanted. The final straw was when he proposed, down on one knee and said, "I knew we were meant to be the moment we matched." On Tinder, go figure. "I love you so much. Now I can show everyone I own you. Will you marry me?" Boy, bye. That was 3 months into the relationship. I'd never met his family but heard a lot about them. I'd only ever met my mother, but that wasn't planned. I said no immediately and walked away. He tried getting into my condo countless times and calling me. Unfortunately, I had to change my number and get a restraining order against him. He was, and probably still, as crazy as Story 3. On my 18th birthday, my boyfriend proposed to me at my party, in front of all my family and friends. I said yes, mostly because I was too embarrassed to say no. We had been dating for 2 years, but I was just about to start university. I wasn't ready at all. I asked later, when we were alone, if we could have a long engagement, at least a year or two, and he agreed. We told their families and friends we would be waiting to get married. Less than 3 months later, his mom and my mom took me out for lunch and decided to take me to look at wedding dresses, because it's never too early to start planning. When I saw a really lovely dress that was on sale, my fiance's mother insisted on buying it for me. Their family was quite wealthy and had set money aside for all my fiance's milestones, education, first car, wedding, etc. She told me they were happy to cover the major costs, as they were the ones who wanted a big wedding, and joked I could pay her back in grandchildren. A few weeks later, his mom introduced me to a friend who was a florist. Next thing I know, I'm looking at bouquets and discussing table arrangements. Then my fiancé starts talking about venues for our wedding, saying we need to start planning so we can find the perfect place. By this point, I'm truly panicking. I'm just a few months into university. I haven't even fully decided what I want to do with my education. Now I'm choosing venues for a wedding that's supposed to be years away. A wedding that's suddenly looking like the nuptials of a minor royal. I tried talking to my fiancé, but he just wouldn't listen. So we booked it and I could finally breathe again. I had 2 years to get ready for my big fat crazy wedding, and the venue had a cancellation. Less than 6 months away and my fiancé accepted it without telling me. just canceled her future date and took the one that was now available. Then he arranged the entire wedding with the help of his mom. And mine. Damn her helicopter ways. Before telling me. When he told me everything was booked, I went mental. His reaction was that he'd gone with all of my choices regarding catering, venue, flowers, etc., and so I should be grateful that he dealt with all the stressful stuff. All I had to do was turn up. When I explained that I didn't want to get married in 6 months' time and that this was the third or fourth time I told him I wasn't ready for marriage yet, he told me I was being childish, that the invitations were at the printer, so it was too late to change my mind. I finally realized that he was manipulating me, so I gave him the engagement ring back and told him I didn't want to see him anymore. I told my family and friends, cried a lot, changed my number because he wouldn't stop calling, etc. 2 months later, my mom got a call from his mother because she hadn't been able to get in touch with me to arrange dress fittings and finalize bridesmaids. He hadn't told them we split up. My mother explained everything to his mother and figured that was that. The following week, she had the audacity to present my family with a bill of half of what they had paid out for the wedding. It came to thousands of pounds. They'd booked everything, right down to the cake and the favors, without telling me and wanted me to pay. Just a quick side note, if you like my content and love listening to my stories, please press the subscribe button and click on the notification bell so you'll get notified of my future uploads. Now back to the stories. Story 4. Not me, but my mother. My mom called off a wedding just weeks before the ceremony date because she found out her fiancé had lied to her about his whereabouts and was partying at a hotel with friends and other women. She caught him in a hot tub at 1 a.m. with twin sisters. Fast forward about 3 years later. She starts dating and later marries the man who is my biological father. She said meeting the family was especially awkward when she discovered my father had 3 sisters, 2 of which were the twins she caught her ex-fiancé with in the hot tub. My mom and dad stayed together and later got married after my mom had learned who his sisters were. So she did get over the fact that they were essentially what ruined her first wedding. My mom and dad were divorced now and have been for years, which is unrelated to my dad's sisters or his family in general. They just weren't compatible together and argued a lot. Not a big surprise that my dad wasn't the most faithful man either. I get my faithfulness in relationships from my mom, thank God. Ooh, I bet that made Christmas dinners really awkward. Story 5. My boyfriend at the time had a female friend who, the night before her wedding, finally spilled to several friends, including him, that her fiancé had been emotionally and physically abusing her, and she wasn't sure she should get married. We'd all noticed her being distanced from us, but she'd deny every time that something was wrong. The next day, her family mobilized to get the word out to all her guests, and a bunch of her friends essentially forced themselves into the guy's house to get all her things back. My boyfriend was a cop, so had a duty to press charges or something on the guy. I was never clear in this part. The woman was pissed off at him for a while, but now a few years later is seeing someone great whom I've actually known forever and is quite a bit happier now. Plus, she knows her friends and family have her back and can get stuff done. Story 6. Heard a story from my mom about a friend of hers who planned on getting married. He was a great guy, very loving and responsible, etc., but his one flaw was his terribly bad temper. Their quarrels were always so bad that she would come crying to my mom about how he yelled at her. My mom advised her friend to leave before it was too late, but the friend genuinely thought he would change. The day before the wedding, he threw a tantrum so bad that he yeeted a whole table past her head, and she nearly got hit. She canceled the wedding and never talked to him again. Story 7. Not me, and I'm not sure it counts as Runaway, but my sister broke up with her fiancé 4 months before their wedding, which was already planned and paid for. I'll be honest, I don't know the full story. Even now, 18 months later, she still hasn't fully opened up to us about it, but I never really liked the guy. He was nice enough, but he absolutely could not handle his drink. He could never handle a little drink. No, he had to drink the whole bar every time. Then would come home and puke up over the entire house. He then had the audacity to complain whenever my sister would go out with her friends just for a couple of drinks, to the point where he eventually just stopped letting her go out altogether. His family was an absolute mess as well. His mom and stepdad were pretty cool, but they moved to Canada to pursue their dreams, leaving my sister and her fiancé in the hands of aunts and uncles who did not approve of her at all. His little brother was on-off with his teenage girlfriend he eventually knocked up, and he was always trying to one-up my sister too. Eventually, as far as she's told us, she just felt trapped by the guy. She was prohibited from hanging out with her friends and was forced to go to family events with people who despised her. He made her distance herself from us, which I think was painful for her, as she essentially missed quality time with her new nephews at the time. He basically controlled every aspect of her life. Anyway, she unceremoniously dumped him on New Year's Eve and canceled the wedding then and there. I don't think she even saw him again after that. She was always out when he came to collect his stuff. Obviously, his family wasn't too happy about it and harassed her for months. She became depressed and needed medication, but it was my family that had to foot the wedding bill anyway. They were just glad to have their daughter back. Story 8. I was almost the runaway bride, and I regret not making that decision. Dated my high school sweetheart for almost 2 years before the jealousy became overwhelming. I broke up with him a month after we'd graduated, but we were going to the same college and met up again that fall. I found myself pregnant by that October and was kicked out of my Catholic home. His parents let me stay with him, but we could no longer live in sin and had to be married. I didn't want to go back to living in my car, so I agreed. Parents wiggle back into my life before the wedding. Fast forward to the day of the ceremony and the music begins playing. I stand to start walking down the aisle, and my dad takes my hand and says, "You know, you don't have to do this. You could come home with us." What the f***? Could he have mentioned this an hour, a day, a week before? I've always hated drama and didn't want to be that person, so I just said that I couldn't, and I got married. My ex was controlling and manipulative, and how he was had become much less subtle side. I became pregnant and turned over when we moved out of his parents' house a year later. I ran when he nearly hit our baby with his shoe, which he threw because he'd found something in the carpet it didn't vacuum properly. Yeah, totally should have picked the runaway bride option. Your dad sounds like a prick. Story 9. A woman I briefly dated was a runaway bride. Her ex never hit her but constantly belittled her and was basically emotionally your standard kid, telling her she was lucky he wanted her, that she could never find anyone better, that she was ugly but he dealt with it, etc. She was a smart kid, was a medic in the military, saving dozens of lives in Pakistan. But emotionally manipulative people can get anyone if given enough time, and he got her. On her wedding day, her dad, who wasn't usually in the picture, having divorced when she was a teen, was having a conversation with her in the ready room and got concerned when she started repeating a lot of the things her fiancé was saying to her. She said that she was mid-sentence when he stood up and said, "Let's go to Dairy Queen," out of the blue. When she was little, they often went to DQ and talked over ice creams. She took a second, agreed, and they left to go to DQ. But he drove 3 towns over and they sat and talked over ice cream for hours, while her phone rang till the battery died while in the car. She said she felt like a huge weight was lifted and felt bad that her friends and family were waiting for her. They would all understand later. He eventually went back to the church and told the bridal party it wasn't happening and got his buddies to come and move all her stuff out the next day. She said that while her dad wasn't the best father in her teens, he was the best dad anyone could ask for that day. We dated for a couple of weeks before I figured out we weren't a good match. We parted amicably, but I haven't talked to her since. Story 10. My dad was a runaway groom, broke it off 3 days before the wedding. The mid-1970s, so he was in his early 20s. His fiancée, not my mom obviously, and her mother pressured him into proposing, which he did with my grandmother's ring. He also felt society sort of demanded it. It was more common to marry at that age than it is today. Deep down he knew she simply wasn't the one, but figured maybe all men felt that way before a wedding, so he ignored that and hoped his feelings would change. Months passed and the wedding was all planned out. When relatives and friends from out of town began flying in for the wedding and gifts were arriving, reality hit him hard and he, to quote God Bluth, realized he made a huge mistake. He sat my grandma and grandpa down and said, "Guys, I don't want to do this." They were proud of him for being honest and actually sort of thrilled. It turns out they hated her guts, but they told him he needed to immediately tell her face to face, and so my dad did. Like a scarred war veteran, he refused to tell me details, but said it was the most gut-wrenching conversation or argument or hell he had ever experienced. But he ended it. Of course, this was in the 1970s. You can't just mass announce the wedding is canceled via text or Facebook message, which a friend of mine did. My dad took the responsibility of calling every single invited guest to tell them the wedding was off. Even more, he personally returned gifts to the people who sent them. His fiancée sold my grandmother's ring. Story 11. I was 16 years old and working at Chess King in the mall when a man, who originally lied about his age saying he was 20, but I shortly found out was 26, came in and was extremely enamored with me. I had some daddy issues, loved the attention, and soon thought I was in love. He asked me to marry him 2 weeks later. He had even asked my parents' permission, and they said yes. I still am upset with him for that. Summer was coming shortly after, and he wanted me to move in with him for the summer. I was living in New York at the time, and he was living in Maryland. He had been in New York visiting his parents and staying with them till his new job started as a used car salesman. So we got in his white pickup truck and drove with him to Maryland for the summer. When I got there, it was a tiny little apartment in an all-black neighborhood. We were both white. He had leased the apartment by phone and had no idea what neighborhood it was in, pre-internet. He took his truck to work every day and I had no transportation, so I would just walk around during the day. Everyone would stare at me and no one actually talked to me. I felt extremely out of place despite trying my best to be okay with the situation. He wanted to do it every day the second he got home from work and would want me to be waiting in the bedroom for him. I hated it, would close my eyes till it was over. After 5 days, I was in the apartment while he was at work, and I opened the silverware drawer and a big cockroach crawled across the utensils. I don't know exactly why that was the turning point for me, but I just said out loud, "Screw this!" I packed my suitcase and sat on the couch with his suitcase on my lap till he got home from work. The second I saw him, I said, "Take me home." He said a lot of stuff and was angry. I said nothing besides that I wanted to go home. Somehow he agreed to driving back to New York and we left that night. The whole way home he talked about how this doesn't change anything and that we'll still be together. I stayed silent. When we pulled into the driveway, I took off the ring and set it on the console. I didn't say anything and booked it into the house and locked the door. He didn't come after me but proceeded to call constantly for weeks. I refused to answer. I never saw him again. I'm 41 now and have 4 children. My oldest is 18. Only as an adult have I been able to see how disgusting and terrifying what I went through was. For years, I was embarrassed to tell that story, but now I realize I was a child and it's him and my parents that should be embarrassed. Story 12. One of the people I know is what I can call a serial fiancé. She dates guys right until they propose to her, then she says yes, starts looking for venues, dresses, etc. Then she calls off the wedding and breaks up with the guy, saying, I didn't want to marry him anyway. He's, insert reason here. The last time this happened, she had an AMA about her wedding on Instagram, but 2 months before the supposed date of the wedding, all her photos, AMA answers, and mentions of engagement were gone. Maybe she's getting a kick out of it. I don't know. Probably likes the idea or fantasy of the wedding, but not the actual commitment. Story 13. Not me, but my best friend was a runaway bride, I guess you can call it, because she backed out of the wedding 2 days before, and she did so by basically packing all her while her fiancé, who was a girl, they were lesbians, my friend is with guys now though, wasn't home. She, my friend, had logged onto her girlfriend's computer for something. I honestly think she was snooping on her because she had a gut feeling something was wrong. She found her social media opened up, or maybe the login information was saved, and she was able to log in. But you know that when you're logged in on a laptop to Facebook Messenger, and a person is also using Facebook Messenger at that same time, you can just sit there and watch a conversation take place. She was watching her girlfriend intimately texting some other girl who worked at the vet that they had been taking their sickly dog to for his skin conditions. After the wedding was called off, her ex-fiancé and that girl from the vet got married, then divorced super fast because they got in a really bad fight. My friend is in an amazing relationship with a man now, and she gets a real kick out of how karma really took care of that situation. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this next video. The YouTube algorithm really thinks you like it.